Imagine being locked away in a place so dreadful it makes modern prisons look like luxury hotels. We're talking no Netflix, no pizza delivery, just cold, hard stone and the constant threat of torture. Yeah, today we're diving into the dark history of the worst medieval prisons you won't believe existed. We're talking about places where even the rats would be like, nah, I'm good. So buckle up, smash that like button for good luck, and let's get this show on the road. First up, we've got the OG House of Horrors, the Tower of London. Now this place has seen it all. Kings, queens, executions, you name it. But what really made it terrifying were the torture methods. We're talking about things straight out of your nightmares. One of the most infamous was the rack. Picture this. You're strapped to a wooden frame and these dudes start cranking on these handles. Your limbs are slowly being pulled in opposite directions. The pain, unimaginable. And that's just one example. They had this thing called the scavenger's daughter, which was like the rack's twisted cousin. It would contort your body into such an unnatural position that you'd wish you were dead. And if those didn't break you, there was always the possibility of being hung, drawn, and quartered. Trust me, you don't want to know the details on that one. Next, we're sailing over to France to check out Chateau d'If, a fortress prison on a tiny island. Think Alcatraz, but way worse. What made this place so bad wasn't necessarily the torture, but the isolation. Imagine being stuck on a rock in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by nothing but cold, damp walls and the sound of crashing waves. You'd go stir-crazy. The worst part? The conditions. The cells were small, dark, and infested with vermin. Food was scarce, and hygiene was non-existent. It was basically a recipe for disease and despair. But hey, at least you had a killer ocean view, right? Except you couldn't even enjoy it because most of the cells had these tiny, barred windows that barely let in any light. Now let's head back to London and visit Newgate Prison, a place so notorious it even had its own stench. Seriously, people said you could smell it from miles away. This place was basically a giant cesspool of filth, disease, and despair. Prisoners were crammed into overcrowded cells with barely enough room to breathe, let alone move. And if you thought the Tower of London was bad with torture, Newgate was in a league of its own. They had public executions right outside the prison gates, and the screams of the condemned would echo through the cells. Talk about psychological torture. But Newgate wasn't just a place of suffering, it was also a hotbed of crime and corruption. Prisoners would often bribe guards to get better treatment or even escape. One of the most infamous inmates was Jack Shepherd, a notorious thief and jailbreaker who became a bit of a folk hero. Yeah, this dude escaped from Newgate not once, but twice. They eventually caught him, but his legend lived on. Our next stop takes us back to France, to the infamous Bastille. This fortress-turned-prison was a symbol of royal oppression and the target of the French Revolution. But before it was stormed by angry mobs, it was home to some of the most unfortunate souls in France. The Bastille was known for its harsh conditions and cruel punishments. One of the most chilling was the use of iron masks. Imagine being forced to wear a heavy iron mask over your face day and night. You couldn't eat, drink, or even breathe properly. It was a slow and agonizing form of torture. The Bastille also had its fair share of secret dungeons, where prisoners were kept in complete darkness and isolation. These dungeons were often damp and rat-infested, and the prisoners were chained to the walls like animals. It's no wonder that the storming of the Bastille became a symbol of freedom and the end of tyranny. Finally, we're traveling back in time to ancient Rome to visit the Mamertine prison, one of the oldest and most notorious prisons in history. This underground dungeon was built around 640 BC and was used to hold criminals, enemies of the state, and even early Christians. The Mamertine prison was basically a death trap. It consisted of two levels, the upper chamber, which was bad enough, and the lower chamber, which was even worse. The lower chamber was accessed through a hole in the floor of the upper chamber and was essentially a dark, damp, and airless pit. Prisoners were lowered down through the hole and left to rot in their own filth. It was said that the stench of death was so strong in the Mamertine prison that it could be smelled from the streets above. Among its most famous prisoners were Saints Peter and Paul, who were imprisoned there before their executions. Today, the Mamertine prison stands as a chilling reminder of the brutality of ancient Rome. Wow, we've just journeyed through some of the darkest corners of history. These prisons were not just places of confinement but of unimaginable suffering. It makes you appreciate how far we've come, right? But hey, enough from me. Which of these prisons shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating historical insights. Until next time, stay curious and stay out of trouble.